Hey there, econ warriors and finance fanatics. It's your boy, the boss of economics, back with another no-holds-barred takedown of the clown show that is modern economic policy. Today, we're diving headfirst into the Jerome Powell Trump showdown, a saga so juicy, it's basically the economic version of a reality TV train wreck. Buckle up, because we're about to expose how government meddling, political grandstanding, and central bank tightrope walking are tanking our economy faster than you can say, recession. Let's roll. If you've been anywhere near a newsfeed lately, you've seen the headlines. Donald Trump, the maestro of chaos, is back at it, swinging his verbal sledgehammer at Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. Trump's beef. Powell isn't slashing interest rates fast enough to juice up the economy, especially as Trump's trade war escalates and threatens to choke growth while jacking up prices. Meanwhile, Powell's over at the Fed, cool as a cucumber, holding rates steady at 4.25% to 4.5%, where they've been since December 2024, while dropping not-so-subtle hints that Trump's tariff obsession might just be the match that lights the inflation dumpster fire. Now, Trump's tantrums aren't exactly new. This guy has been Powell's personal heckler since appointing him in 2018, calling him everything from a major loser to a total stiff to, most recently, a fool who doesn't have a clue. But the latest twist? Trump's inner circle is reportedly whispering that Powell could be legally fired as Fed chair, despite laws protecting central bank independence. Yikes. Talk about a plot twist that could send markets into a tailspin faster than a Tesla stock crash. But here's where it gets spicy. Congress, including some of Trump's own GOP cronies, is actually backing Powell. From Oklahoma's Frank Lucas calling Powell a stabilizing force to North Dakota's Kevin Cramer praising his admirable performance, it seems like the Fed chair has more friends on Capitol Hill than Trump has enemies, and that's saying something. So, what's really going on here? Is this just political theater, or is there a deeper economic mess brewing? Spoiler alert, it's the latter, and the government's fingerprints are all over it. Let's peel back the surface drama and get to the meat of the issue. The independence of the Federal Reserve is under attack, and it's not just Trump's Twitter tirades, or Oval Office rants, that are to blame. The Fed's autonomy is the bedrock of modern monetary policy. Central banks need to be free from political meddling to make decisions based on data, not populist whims. But Trump's constant pressure to lower rates, combined with his team's legal musings about firing Powell, threatens to torch that independence and turn the Fed into a White House puppet. Why does this matter? Because when central banks lose their independence, bad things happen. History is littered with examples. Take Turkey, where President Erdogan's meddling in the central bank led to runaway inflation, hitting a jaw-dropping 85.5% in October 2022, according to official data, though independent estimates pegged it even higher. Or look at Argentina, where political interference in monetary policy has fueled chronic inflation, with rates soaring to 118% in 2023, per the International Monetary Fund, IMF. When politicians call the shots, central banks are pressured to prioritize short-term growth, or political wins, over long-term stability, and the result is always the same: inflation spirals, currencies tank, and the average Joe gets crushed. Now, Trump's defenders might argue he's just trying to fix the economy. But let's be real, his playbook is straight out of the populist dictator handbook: bully the central bank into printing money or slashing rates to goose the stock market, consequences be damned. And the consequences could be brutal. The U.S. economy is already teetering on the edge, with GDP growth slowing to a measly 1.6% annualized rate in Q1 2025, according to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, BEA, while inflation remains stubbornly above the Fed's 2% target at 3.4%, per the latest Consumer Price Index, CPI, data. If Trump gets his way and forces rate cuts, we could be staring down the barrel of stagflation, a toxic cocktail of stagnant growth and rampant inflation that makes the 1970s look like a picnic. But hold up. Before we let Powell off the hook, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Because while Trump's attacks on the Fed are reckless, the government's broader economic mismanagement is the real villain here. From trade wars to fiscal profligacy, Washington's blunders are setting the stage for a recession that could make the Great Recession look like a minor hiccup. First, let's talk about Trump's trade war. His latest round of tariffs, announced in early 2025, slapped a 25% tax on $300 billion worth of Chinese imports, according to the U.S. Trade Representative. Powell himself warned in April 2025 that these tariffs could drive both inflation and unemployment higher, and he's not wrong. Tariffs are essentially a tax on consumers, raising the cost of goods while disrupting supply chains. A 2024 study by the National Bureau of Economic Research, NBR, found that Trump's earlier tariffs cost U.S. consumers $40 billion annually in higher prices, and the latest escalation could double that figure. Meanwhile, retaliatory tariffs from China are hammering U.S. exporters, with agricultural exports to China plummeting 30% since 2018, per the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA. The result? Higher prices, lower growth, and a Fed that's stuck between a rock and a hard place. But it's not just Trump's trade follies. Let's not forget the fiscal mess left by the Biden administration, which Powell conveniently sidestepped criticizing. Biden's $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan in 2021, followed by the $1 trillion Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, poured fuel on an already overheated economy, helping ignite the post-COVID inflation spike that peaked at 9.1% in June 2022, according to the CPI. The Congressional Budget Office, CBO, estimates that federal debt held by the public will hit 122% of GDP by 2035, up from 99% in 2024, thanks to unchecked spending. This debt binge not only crowds out private investment but also limits the government's ability to respond to future crises, leaving the Fed as the only game in town to clean up the mess. And speaking of messes, let's not ignore Congress's role in this circus. While some GOP lawmakers are backing Powell, others, like Senator Rick Scott, are teaming up with Democrats like Elizabeth Warren to push for more Fed oversight. Their bill to create an independent watchdog sounds noble, who doesn't want accountability, but it risks further politicizing the Fed at a time when it needs independence more than ever. Plus, the Fed's already dealing with ethics scandals, like the 2021 trading controversy involving regional Fed presidents, which eroded public trust. Piling on more political pressure isn't the answer, it's just another symptom of a government that's more interested in scoring points than solving problems. So, where does this leave us? In a word, screwed. The economy is a ticking time bomb, and the government's mismanagement is lighting the fuse. Trump's attacks on the Fed threaten to undermine its independence, forcing it into a corner where it either caves to political pressure and risks hyperinflation or stands firm and gets blamed for a slowdown. Meanwhile, his trade war is strangling growth, Biden's fiscal irresponsibility has left us drowning in debt, and Congress is too busy playing partisan games to do anything meaningful. The data backs this up. The Conference Board's leading economic index, a key predictor of recessions, has been declining for 12 straight months as of April 2025, signaling a high probability of a downturn within the next year. The yield curve, another recession indicator, inverted again in March 2025, with the 10-year Treasury yield falling below the 2-year yield, per Federal Reserve data. And consumer confidence? It's tanking, with the University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index dropping to 65.6 in April 2025, the lowest since mid-2022. Translation: people are scared, and they should be. Here's the deal, folks, the government is driving this economy off a cliff, and they're trying to drag the Fed down with them. Trump's obsession with controlling the Fed is a dangerous power grab, but Powell's not exactly a saint either. He was too slow to tackle inflation in 2021 and too timid to call out Biden's spending spree. But the real blame lies with our so-called leaders in Washington, who've turned economic policy into a political football while the rest of us are left holding the bag. So, what's the solution? First, hands off the Fed. Congress needs to enshrine its independence in law, not chip away at it. Second, stop the trade war madness. Tariffs are a lose-lose for everyone except Trump's ego. And third, get the fiscal house in order, cut the deficit, reform entitlements, and stop treating the budget like a bottomless piggy bank. Will any of this happen? Not a chance, not with this crew of clowns running the show. Alright, econ warriors, that's all for today's roast of the government's economic incompetence. If you're as fed up as I am, smash that like button, share this video, and drop a comment about the dumbest economic policy you've seen lately. And hey, if you're a finance pro or just a regular Joe trying to make sense of this mess, subscribe to Boss Economics World. We'll keep calling out the nonsense so you don't have to. Until next time, stay sharp, stay skeptical, and keep fighting the good fight. Boss out.